She didn't even look at me when she said it. Just raised her glass, smiled that tight smile she saves for parties and public praise, and declared, "I'm proud of all my children, except the loser. My name is Elizabeth." And I was standing right there. It took 3 seconds for the silence to hit the room, for my brother to nervously laugh, and 5 for me to leave. But walking out wasn't the end. It was just the first fracture in a family that's been splintering for years. It was supposed to be a toast. A warm, wine glass clinking, slightly awkward family tradition where Mum made her annual speech about how grateful she was for all of us, her children, her pride, her proof that she'd done something right. That's what I braced for as she stood, napkin delicately patted to her lips, and picked up her glass with that practiced, performative grace. She always knew how to command attention. The dining room, humming with laughter and the faint scrape of cutlery on china, fell into a hush as she cleared her throat. "I just want to say," she began, eyes scanning the table, pausing on each sibling like she was mentally checking off a list, "how proud I am of my children." I felt my chest flutter, nervous anticipation. Maybe this time, maybe this year she'd include me. I was sitting at the far end, next to the coat rack and a half-eaten salad no one claimed. I smiled too quickly. "I shouldn't have." She went on. "Jonathan, my brilliant doctor, saving lives, traveling to conferences, always making time for his family." She raised her glass. Applause. A nod from Jonathan. "Rachel, my fierce little CEO. Who would have thought my quiet girl would run her own company by 30? More nods. "Cheers." Mum's smile widened. Then, without hesitation, and without turning her head in my direction, she said it. "And, of course, I'm proud of all my children, except the loser." It was a clean slice. No name attached, no eye contact. Just the word. Loser. A grenade lobbed across the table with surgical precision. The worst part? No one asked who she meant. They didn't have to. There was a pause, not long, but long enough to hear the ceiling fan clicking above us and the distant hum of traffic outside. Rachel reached for her water. Jonathan let out an awkward half-laugh, like maybe if he pretended it was a joke, it would become one. My aunt coughed. And still, she didn't look at me. My fork was still in my hand. I remember that. I hadn't touched my plate since she started talking, and I hadn't realized I was gripping the utensil like a lifeline, white-knuckled and shaking. My palms were slick. My heart had slipped into that cold, thudding rhythm it falls into when I've heard this voice before, not just in her words, but in how everyone else accepted it. I stood up. Chair legs scraped wood. No one stopped me. No one called my name. Not even a whisper of, "Liz, wait." As I walked out of the room, past the coats and the clatter of silverware returning to plates, I realized something terrifying. She hadn't said it to shame me. She'd said it because she truly believed it. Growing up, I learned to read the room before I learned to read books. In our house, attention was a currency, and praise was something you earned with perfection, not effort. Jonathan figured that out early. He brought home A's, awards, medals from science fairs. Mum bragged about him to strangers in grocery store lines. She posted his report cards on the fridge like they were diplomas. When he got into med school, she cried louder than he did. Rachel followed close behind. Quieter than Jonathan, but sharper in her own way. She was the organized one. The kid who color-coded her binders and started her first small business at 15, selling homemade jewelry at school. Mum didn't even wear jewelry, but suddenly she had a new necklace every week. She called Rachel my little mogul long before she ever stepped foot in a boardroom. Then there was me, Elizabeth. Third in line. The dreamer. The sensitive one. I wrote stories in my bedroom and got lost in books. I was the one who forgot to put the chicken back in the fridge and cried when the dog died. I wasn't a disaster. I wasn't rebellious or cruel. I just didn't shine the way they did. When I told Mum I wanted to study literature, she laughed. Not in a cruel way, just the sort of laugh that says, "Oh, that's cute." She asked me what kind of job that led to. I said I could be a writer. She said, "So you'll live in my basement forever?" and moved on like it was a passing joke. But it was never just a joke. Everything I did became a disappointment in waiting. I got decent grades, never good enough to mention. I tried art school for a year, too expensive. I moved cities to start over, irresponsible. I came home once with a boyfriend she didn't like, predictable. Over time, I learned to brace for impact before I even spoke. Even my wins came with a warning. That's nice, but don't get your hopes up. Holidays were the worst. Jonathan would bring slideshows from his latest humanitarian trip, and Rachel would hand out branded mugs from her startup's new product launch. And me? I once brought cookies I baked from scratch, and Mum asked if I'd remembered to wash my hands this time. It wasn't just her either. My siblings followed her lead without even realizing it. They loved me in that vague, arm's-length way people love someone they don't quite take seriously. They asked how I was doing, but they never waited for the full answer. I became the family footnote. She's still figuring it out, sister. The one who was into her artsy stuff, but couldn't quite explain what that meant to anyone's satisfaction. Still, I tried. I showed up. I offered to help clean after dinners. I sent cards on birthdays. I kept hoping for some version of the mother who used to tuck me in at night and stroke my hair and whisper that I was her sweetest one. I don't know when that woman left, or if she was ever real. Looking back now, I wonder if Mum always needed one of us to be less than a foil to sharpen her pride in the others. Maybe Jonathan and Rachel looked so golden because someone had to stay in the shadows to make them shine. And I, quiet, inconvenient, stubborn Elizabeth, was easier to dim than to understand. The invitation came as a text from Rachel. Family dinner at Mum's next Saturday. Full house. You coming? No emoji. No follow-up. Just that flat, factual tone she always used, like she was sending a calendar reminder rather than asking if I wanted to subject myself to another carefully curated night of feeling like I didn't belong. I stared at the screen for a long time. My thumb hovered over no. I had reasons, real ones. I'd just picked up weekend shifts at the bookstore. I was tired. I had nothing to wear that Mum wouldn't wordlessly critique with a glance. But I didn't press send. Instead, I thought about last Christmas. I hadn't gone. I said I was sick, but I wasn't. I just couldn't take another evening watching Mum beam at Jonathan's slideshow of his surgical mission while she forgot what city I lived in. And I remembered how Rachel texted me later that night, not to ask if I was okay, but to say, "Mum noticed you weren't there." She didn't say anything, but you could tell.
There was something about that.
She didn't say anything, but you could tell. Like my absence was loud, even if no one acknowledged it. Like maybe, just maybe, my presence still mattered. So I said yes. And once I said yes, I started to hope. Not hope in a big, foolish way. Not the kind of hope where I imagined Mum hugging me at the door or asking to read one of my essays. But tiny, quiet hope. The kind that sneaks in while you're folding laundry or choosing earrings. The kind that whispers, maybe this year will be different. I bought a new dress. Nothing dramatic, just something soft, something that felt like me. I baked a lemon tart from scratch, using a recipe Dad used to love. I even picked up a bottle of wine I knew Rachel liked, because I thought maybe if I reached out first, it might break the weird, polite stiffness that had crept between us over the years. On the drive over, I rehearsed small talk in my head. I tried to think of things to say that sounded casual but confident, updates that might make me seem less like the loser Mum had probably already labeled me as in her mind. I wasn't where they were in life, sure, but I wasn't lost, either. I had my own place. I taught a weekly writing class at the community center. I was working on a collection of essays I hadn't told anyone about. Quiet wins, but wins nonetheless. When I pulled up to the house, I just sat in the car for a while. The windows were lit up, bright, familiar rectangles of warmth, and I could already see silhouettes moving in the kitchen. Laughter floated through the glass, like perfume I couldn't quite reach. I hadn't lived there in years, but something about the driveway, the porch, the way the wind rustled the same tired rosebush, it made me feel 16 again. 16 and raw, praying that if I just acted right or said the right thing, Mum would notice me the way she noticed them. I rang the bell. Rachel answered. She looked surprised to see me, like she hadn't really expected me to come. "Oh, hey," she said, stepping aside. You look nice. A beat too long. Come in. I handed her the wine and followed her into the house, holding the tart like it was some kind of peace offering. The smell of roast chicken and garlic bread hit me first. Then the noise, familiar voices, the scrape of chairs, Jonathan's laugh. I took a deep breath. I reminded myself that I belonged here, that I had just as much right to sit at that table as anyone else. I didn't know yet that this night would become the exact moment I stopped trying. I still believed, even then, in the possibility of being seen. The hallway felt longer than it had on the way in. My heels clicked against the hardwood like a countdown, and I remember thinking how bizarre it was that no one called after me. No one, not Jonathan, not Rachel, not even my aunt with the overly soft voice who always asked about my little writing projects. I didn't slam the door. I wanted to. I wanted to make some kind of noise that would force them to react. But I just pulled it shut, carefully, like I was leaving a museum instead of my mother's home. The porch light made everything look too gentle.
Too calm.
Outside, the night was sharp with early spring chill. I walked halfway to my car before realizing I was still holding the lemon tart. Perfect, untouched, in its glass dish. I thought about throwing it, shattering it across the sidewalk, watching the buttery crust and pale yellow filling splatter across the concrete. But I didn't. Instead, I set it carefully on the hood of my car, like it was something fragile I didn't want to take with me. I sat in the driver's seat with the door open, keys in my lap. My hands were still shaking. Not violently, just enough that I had to press my palms against my thighs to still them. My face was hot. My teeth clenched so tightly I was afraid my jaw might cramp. No one followed me. I kept telling myself someone would. Rachel, maybe. Or Jonathan. Surely at least one of them would come out to check on me. Even just to smooth things over, to explain away what Mum said as a bad joke or a glass of wine too many. That was her usual defense, you know how she gets. But 10 minutes passed. Then 15. Nothing. I checked my phone. No messages. No missed calls. Just the group text from earlier that week, now sitting like a cruel joke in my notifications. I replayed the moment in my head, over and over, like some sad little loop I couldn't escape. The way Mum had lifted her glass, how her eyes skimmed right past me, how everyone's discomfort wasn't about what she said, but the fact that I reacted, that I refused to play along, that I walked away from the script we'd all been acting out for years. Because that's what this was, really a performance. One we'd been rehearsing since childhood. Mum the proud matriarch, Jonathan the prodigy, Rachel the success story, and me, the cautionary tale nobody ever officially named. We just knew our lines. And tonight I went off script. I should have known better. I did know better. But still I hoped. I don't know how long I sat there before the porch light flicked off.
Just like that.
They were moving on. Another round of wine. Another course served. Another story shared around the table like nothing had happened. And I knew, in that moment, something final had snapped. Not in anger, but in clarity. They were never going to come after me.
Not really.
Because deep down, they had already accepted the version of the story where I was the one who never quite measured up. And it was easier to let that version stand than to confront the possibility that maybe, just maybe, the family portrait they loved to display had been framed around a lie. Still gripping the keys, I turned the ignition. Headlights flared against the empty driveway. And as I pulled away, I didn't cry.
Not then.
The sadness would come later, in waves, in the middle of washing dishes or hearing a song on the radio. But in that moment, what I felt most was something sharper, something colder. I felt erased. I didn't sleep that night. Sleep requires a kind of peace I hadn't known in years, and after the dinner, the silence was too loud, the shame too fresh, the memories too fast. I lay there staring at the ceiling, thoughts unraveling in all directions. What I should have said. What I should have shouted. The way Mum didn't even flinch when I left. The way everyone just let it happen. By morning, something in me had shifted. Not anger. Not yet. But resolve. A bone-deep certainty that I wasn't going to carry this quietly anymore. I texted Rachel first. We need to talk. She replied instantly. Are you okay? That question alone almost made me laugh.
Now?
After everything? I didn't answer right away. I didn't need to. I told her I'd be by the house that afternoon, not to talk things through, but to say what needed to be said. When I arrived, Mum was in the sunroom, nursing a second cup of tea like she didn't just drop a live grenade into the middle of her family 18 hours ago. She looked up, eyebrows raised slightly, as if surprised to see me standing there, but not surprised enough to show concern. Rachel stood off to the side, arms crossed, awkward as hell. Jonathan wasn't there. Elizabeth, Mum said, drawing out the syllables like they were unfamiliar on her tongue. Didn't expect you back so soon. I stayed standing.
I didn't set my bag down.
I didn't sit when she gestured to the armchair like a hostess welcoming a guest she wasn't thrilled to see. Last night, I said, voice steady despite the thudding in my chest, you called me a loser. In front of the entire family. She blinked. A beat passed. Then she gave a soft, practiced shrug. It was a joke. You're too sensitive. There it was. The phrase she had used my entire life to flatten me, to turn sharp truth into harmless banter. But this time I didn't take the bait. It wasn't a joke, I said. You meant it. Everyone at that table knew exactly who you were talking about. She set her tea down slowly. You always find a way to make things about you, don't you? That's when I laughed low, bitter.
No, Mum. You make things about me.
You just make them ugly. The room went still. Rachel shifted but said nothing. All my life, I continued, you've made it clear that I am your biggest disappointment. And I've tried, for years, to earn something from you.
Respect.
Approval. Hell, even just acknowledgement. But I realized something last night. I was never going to get it. Not because I'm not worthy of it, but because you need someone to look down on. That's ridiculous, she snapped, her composure finally cracking. You're twisting everything. No, I'm finally untwisting it, I said. I'm done performing. I'm done being the scapegoat, so everyone else can stay comfortable. She stood up then, like the height difference might give her back the power. So, what? You're cutting me out now? Is that what this is? Some dramatic exit to make yourself feel better? No, I said. This is me telling the truth. To your face. For the first time. Rachel's voice broke in softly behind me. Mum, she's not wrong. We both turned. Mum's expression hardened. Excuse me? Rachel looked like she might fold, but to her credit, she didn't. You do treat her differently. You always have. And we let it happen because it was easier than challenging you. That silenced the room more than anything I'd said. Mum's jaw clenched. She looked between us like we were strangers. This family has operated on your terms for so long, I said quietly. And you've convinced everyone, including me, that love had to be earned, that it was conditional. I used to think if I just tried harder, I'd be enough. But I'm done trying. I'm not here for an apology. I don't need one. You think you're better than us now? Mum said, venomously. No, I said. I think I'm better than who I used to be when I still believed you. I turned to Rachel. She nodded once. There was no big embrace, no tearful reconciliation, just understanding a start. I walked out of that house with nothing in my hands and everything I needed in my chest. It wasn't closure. It was something better. A week after the confrontation, I got a message from my Aunt Diana. Just one sentence. I saw what happened, and I think it's time you knew the rest. It caught me off guard. Aunt Diana was Mum's older sister by 2 years, the quieter one, the one who always sat at the edge of the room at family gatherings, refilling wine glasses and staying out of conversations that got too sharp. I hadn't even realized she'd been at the dinner that night. She had that way of disappearing into the background, not unlike me. Maybe that's why I always liked her more than the others. She never pretended the family was perfect. We met at a cafe the next day. She looked tired in a way I hadn't noticed before, creases a little deeper, voice a little softer. But when she looked at me across the table, there was something in her eyes I didn't recognize. Recognition. I've been watching this dynamic for years, she said, hands wrapped around her mug. And I've kept quiet longer than I should have. Because I knew where it came from. I blinked. What do you mean? She exhaled like the weight of 4 decades was being pushed out of her lungs. Your mother didn't invent this behavior, Lizzie. She inherited it. And just like that, the air changed. Diana told me things I'd never known. About their childhood. About their mother. My grandmother. A woman I barely remembered except as a cold, heavily perfumed figure in old photo albums. She used to pit the girls against each other constantly, playing favorites like it was a game. Diana was the rule follower, the good girl. My mother? She was the scapegoat, blamed for every spill, every lie, every moment of chaos. She grew up believing love was something to be won, not given. And when she couldn't win it, she made sure no one else could either. She used to say, Diana murmured, if I can't be the favorite, at least I won't be the forgotten. It hit me like a brick in the chest. I sat there in silence, piecing it together. My mother, who had spent her life trying to sculpt her image into something perfect and praiseworthy, had once been the one sitting at the far end of the table, desperate to be seen. She hadn't just become cruel out of nowhere. She'd been forged in it. That didn't make it okay. Not even close. But it explained the coldness, the control, the way she clipped her approval like coupons, handed out sparingly, only to the ones who performed. She always needed someone to be less than, Diana said, so she could feel more than.
I didn't cry.
Not in that moment. Instead, I felt something quieter settle into my bones. A kind of peace that comes not from forgiveness, but from understanding. For the first time, I saw my mother not as the judge and jury of my worth, but as someone still trapped in her own sentence. She had passed down the very cruelty she swore she'd never become. And I had been her mirror, reflecting the part of herself she never learned how to love. Maybe that's why she resented me most of all. She's never going to apologize, Diana said gently. She may never even admit to herself what she did. But that doesn't mean you can't move on. You don't have to carry it anymore. That line stayed with me. You don't have to carry it anymore. For so long, I thought the weight was mine. That something in me earned the label of disappointment. That if I could just hustle harder, bend better, shrink smaller, I'd finally be worthy of kindness. But now I saw it for what it was, a script written long before I was born. One that had been passed down like china, fragile, dangerous, and outdated. And I was the first one to drop it. I left the cafe that day knowing something essential had changed. Not in my mother, but in me. I didn't need her validation anymore, because I understood where the void came from, and it wasn't mine to fill. What came next wouldn't be easy. Healing never is. But now, at least, I had something my mother never gave me. I didn't write my mother off. I made a decision. There's a difference. For weeks after the confrontation, the silence stretched between us like a rope neither of us was willing to pull on. No calls. No emails. Not even a passive-aggressive birthday card in the mail with a quote about tough love, circled in red pen. And, to my surprise, I didn't miss it. Not really. I missed the idea of her. The mother I kept trying to believe was buried somewhere beneath the performance. But the real version, the one who needed someone to blame in order to feel blameless?
No.
I didn't miss that at all. The thing is, once you stop chasing someone's love, you start seeing everything you already had. I had my quiet mornings back. I had peace in my chest where anxiety used to live rent-free. I started writing again, not to prove anything, not to make a point, but because the words finally felt like they belonged to me again. I shared a piece at my writing group about the reunion. Raw. Unfiltered. A woman my mother's age came up to me afterward with tears in her eyes and said, "That was my story, too." I didn't need Mum to hear it. I needed to hear myself. Jonathan eventually texted. A soft, guilt-laced, "Hey, I've been meaning to check in." That night was the lot. I didn't reply. Not right away. When I did, it was simple. It was, "I hope you're reflecting." Rachel called a few days later. She didn't apologize for everything, but she said enough to show she was trying to see me differently now. "I didn't realize how much we failed you," she said. "I thought if you weren't saying anything, you were fine." I told her that silence is a language people learn when speaking up only gets them hurt. We've started talking more, not about Mom, but about us. About childhood. About the roles we were shoved into and the years it took to notice the bruises they left behind. For the first time in forever, it feels like we're building something that isn't just performative politeness. As for Mom, I didn't block her. But I turned off the emotional faucet. I set boundaries, not the kind you threaten to enforce, but the kind you live by. I decided not to attend the next family gathering. I didn't offer excuses. Just said, I won't be coming. I'm prioritizing my peace. And for once, I meant it. Sometimes I imagine her reading that message, scoffing, maybe even saying to someone, there she goes again, being dramatic. And for the first time in my life, I don't care. Let her tell whatever story she needs to maintain her illusion. I'm not in that narrative anymore. The story I'm writing now doesn't have a villain. It doesn't need one. It has a woman who survived being made small and decided, quietly but unmistakably, to stop apologizing for taking up space. I saw her again, months later, by accident, at a cousin's baby shower I hadn't realized she'd be attending. We made eye contact across the garden, the kind of glance that used to undo me, that used to twist my stomach into knots and make me rehearse every sentence before I spoke. But not this time. She smiled that thin, polite smile she used on people she no longer controlled. And I nodded once, not cold, not warm, just clear. Steady. She turned away first. And for the first time in my life, I didn't wonder what she thought of me. I already knew who I was. And she didn't get to decide anymore.